Alright coders, let's add the first game to our project. If you didn't watch the first video, you're definitely going to want to watch that first, or you're not going to know where any of this stuff came from. Okay, so what we want to happen is our first game is not really a game. It's just a little simulation about how we're going to load up the rocket. But we want that to appear when the player clicks on the number 1 button. So right now, this sprite doesn't do anything when you click on it. You can come to button 1 and add an event that says when the sprite is clicked, and then that becomes a button. So let's do that now. So when the sprite is clicked, when the one button sprite is clicked, what we want to happen is we want to have a background appear with a rocket, a different background with a rocket, and some different objects that we're going to load up the rocket with. But we also want everything that's on this screen to disappear. Well, what command could we use to make all of these things hide? Well, if you remember from the last video, that's this broadcast right here, clear everything. Okay, so when this sprite is clicked, all of these things are going to just disappear, all these 8 buttons, which is exactly what we wanted it to do. So we're going to run it again because that brings them back. And let's give button 1 a little bit more power in what it's going to do. Okay, so when button 1 is clicked, it's going to hide the rest of the buttons. It's going to broadcast, clear everything, and let's broadcast this other thing called broadcast new message, start game 1. Now, it's really important that you name these things with something that makes sense to you. If you look at it later, you'll remember what it's supposed to do. Because if I just said broadcast message 1, message 2, message 3, message 4, with this big complicated program like this one's going to make, it's going to be really confusing down the road. Okay, so we're going to call start game 1 when you click on button number 1. Okay, so we don't have any, well, right now broadcast start game 1 doesn't do anything because none of the things in our program have a when I receive start game 1 button attached. So nothing will happen yet. Let's do something right now with the backdrop though. Because one of the things we want to happen is to make this rocket look like it's sitting on the ground. We don't want it appearing in space. So the backdrop's the easiest way to change that. Come to the backdrop here. Click on code. Make sure you can see the code here. And let's tell the backdrop what to do when it receives the message start game 1. Well, we want the background to say, we want the background to change. Well, right now we don't have any backdrops to change it to. So let's add another backdrop. So I clicked on backdrops, and I'm coming down here, and I'm just going to choose a backdrop. And we're going to just pick this blue sky one. Okay, so blue sky has a little bit of dirt, some bushes, and a blue sky. That's amazing. Okay, and come back to our code. Now that we have a different backdrop, when the backdrop receives start game 1, we can change the backdrop. So come to looks, and you see right here, switch backdrop to. You have different options if you're on a sprite here, but if you're on the backdrop and you come to looks, one of your options are, well, you can change the backdrop, you can change the way the backdrop looks. We're just going to switch to the backdrop blue sky. Okay, well that brings up an interesting thing though, because now when we run the flag and click the button 1, it brings up the blue sky. How do we get the stars back for the next time we run the green, the next time we run the program? Well, we need one here that says switch backdrop to, and back to the home screen. And we want that to appear when the green flag is clicked. It shouldn't really matter if it's here or there. We're going to just put it here, so the backdrop, when the green flag is clicked, is going to reset it to the home screen. It's going to clear everything, and it's going to tell all of the things that belong on the main screen to show up. But when the player clicks on button 1, it'll receive the message start game 1, and it'll change to the blue sky. So here is Mission to Mars. You click on the 1. All of the buttons disappear. The backdrop changes to blue sky. Okay, so now we need some different sprites on the screen. So let's grab a rocket, because we want the rocket on the left side of the screen. A rocket ship. It should show up right there. And we want to look at the costumes of the rocket. For this one, I mean, you could always draw your own, but for some reason they made this rocket ship E1 just a little bit wonky. So I always like to come in with this sprite, make sure I'm on the arrow tool, highlight everything, shrink it down a little bit, and move it a little bit, just so that when you're switching back and forth between the costumes, it looks okay. Looks like it needs to be a little bit lower too. I think that looks alright. Okay, so this sprite is just going to sit down here on the bottom of the screen, but we want, and we'll just leave it there. It doesn't need to probably have anything else than that. But think about it. Do we want this rocket to appear all the time, or just when it's level 1? Well, it's just when it's on game 1. So come to events, and we need to tell this rocket that when it receives clear everything, it needs to get off the screen. So we're going to go to looks and hide. And you, boys and girls, you'll see this on every sprite we add. When I receive clear everything, hide. And then when I receive game 1, start game 1, then it's going to show up. So go back under looks and do show. Okay. So if we test this, green flag disappears, click on level 1. There's the backdrop and the rocket, because the backdrop knows what to do when it receives start game 1, and this rocket knows what to do when it receives start game 1. Okay, remember how I said we're going to have lots of sprites in this program? Though we need to rename this sprite here, because we're actually going to use this rocket ship for about half of the different programs that we're doing. So we're going to call this game 1 rocket. Okay. It's going to be helpful to keep those things separated, because these might, you might have to go back and find the one to change a code, and you want to make sure you're changing the correct one. Okay, so the point of game 1 is just to throw 5 objects on the screen and have them load up in the rocket. So let's choose 5 more objects. You can choose anything you want. Just think about what might some people want with them if they're going to go to Mars. Well, I'm going to want to take a crab. And I'm going to want to take, let's see, maybe a donut. Should probably take this guy, Giga, I guess. And maybe, where's that dog? There's a dog here with the helmet dot. We're going to bring the space dog. And then we're going to bring one more thing, a motorcycle, which that is not really a motorcycle, but there we go. Now, boys and girls, you could use your own creativity for this. It doesn't really matter. The point is that we're going to load up the rocket, and we're just going to show how different sprites can travel and move on the screen. Okay, do we want these sprites to show up all the time, or just when we're on game 1? Well, just when we're on game 1. So the quickest way to do that is come back to the rocket where we already have the code, and just drag that down to your other sprites. If you drag the code to the other sprites, it just copies it to them. So now the crab and the donut and Giga and the dot and the motorcycle all have that block of code that says when I receive clear everything, hide, and let's have them show up when they receive start game 1 too. So I went back to the rocket. I'm clicking start game 1, and I'm dragging it over to each of these other sprites. And I think that's the quickest way to reuse code. Okay, so now when we run the green flag, each one of these sprites will hide, and when you click on the 1 button, each one will show up. We're off to a good start. I'm going to change the size of these. I think these are a little bit too big, so I'm going to change each of these to the size 50. So the donut's 50, the crab's 50, this little alien creature's 50, space dog 50, and the motorcycle, I'm going to switch to 50. Okay, now let's think about what we want these sprites to do. Well, we don't really care where on the screen they begin, right? So we can have them when they receive start game 1, and let's do the crab first and get it perfect, and then we can just copy the code over to the other ones too. So when I receive start game 1, what I want to happen is we're going to have let's have them start in the same spot every time. Okay, so let's add a block of code to each one of these separately. I probably should do that first. When I receive start game 1, let's drag over the go to. Now I put them on the screen here, kind of in an okay spot, but you can decide where you want them to go on your screen. But then as you go down, you can drag over this block that says go to under start game 1, and the default for go to is the place that it's currently at on the screen. So each one of these will go right to where they are. Now I did that one wrong. See how it says go to? It needs to be under start game, not under clear everything. Okay, and then we'll put go to here under start game. So now if we move these things around, which we're going to do in the program, when we hit the green flag, they'll all hide. But when you click the 1 button, they'll all go back to their starting location. Okay? So, what do we want these things to do? Well, we want them to go onto the rocket. Now, there's different ways to do that. We're going to do the easiest way here with just a glide statement. So click on your crab, and under motion, there's one here that says glide 1 second to random position. We don't want to go to a random position though, so click on that, and we want to go to game 1 rocket. Now remember I told you it's important to name your objects, because when you ever go to do this, you want to make sure you're picking the right sprite. So we want to go to game 1 rocket. For the donut, we're going to glide 1 second to game 1 rocket. Hey, Giga, whatever. It's going to glide 1 second to game 1 rocket. Dot is going to glide 1 second to game 1 rocket. And the motorcycle will glide 1 second to game 1 rocket. Now, so when you hit this, they should all go over to the rocket. Actually, when you hit the green flag, they won't, because you have to come here and hit the 1 button. Okay, let's try that again. 1 button. That's pretty good. I mean, that's exactly what we wanted it to do. I want this rocket, though, here to be on the front. So under looks, you can come down here under show hide and tell it to go to the front layer. And so next time when we run it, all of those objects should go behind the rocket. Okay? And let's have them disappear. It'll look better if they look like they're going inside the rocket too. So they're going to go to their starting position, they'll glide, and then let's put a hide statement after each of those glide statements. And then this game's about done. After the glide, it's going to hide. After the glide, it's going to hide. Click on the 1. We loaded up the rocket. Okay, that is the purposes of this video right here. But I have a challenge for you. If you want to make your program better than mine, could you have the sprites travel at a different speed? I mean, if they all showed up at the rocket at the exact same time, they'll probably get jammed up in the door. So you can either have them start at different speeds, start at different times, or travel at different speeds. So I'm going to give you the challenge to work on that. You can add an event statement or a control statement here that says wait, or you could just change this glide number here. And I'll show you just on one of these. So let's change the motorcycle from a 1 to a 5, for example. So all of the other ones will take 1 second, but the motorcycle will take 5 seconds. See, that's one way you can do it. I'm going to leave that up to you on how you might want to do that for the other ones, though. So make sure you come back. For the next video, we're going to do a countdown and have our rocket take off.